The circumstances and the context of my birth in Nepal meant that considerable odds were stacked against me. And what's more, that these odds may even be impossible for me to overcome. While I suffered because of that, these odds did not, however, determine my destiny. I was able to achieve my dreams. I credit that. I credit my ability to achieve my dreams to, firstly, the privilege of education, both formal and informal, and secondly, to people, to humanity. It's precisely because of that, because I've suffered and owe my success to people, that I've returned to provide that same kind of privilege to the next generation of Nepalese, born into the kind of background I was, and to inspire the next generation of Nepalese, like yourselves, sitting here, well, not all of you, to dream and become agents of change in our country. This presentation is all about how I pursued my dream, how I pursued my dreams, and continue to pursue them. And why I do what I do, and finally, what you could do. I'm from the little village of Thangbe in Mustang district. Raise your hand if you can walk up there and point out where Mustang is. Raise your hand. Don't be shy now. If you know where Mustang is, raise your hand and walk up, saunter up there, and point it out for the rest of us. Yes. You raise your hand. I can't believe there isn't a single one of you who can point out Mustang up there. Surely there's someone here. I don't bite, honest. You can come up here. All right, finally. All right, Mustang. Thank you, that's it. You got it. Yeah. All right. As a child, I lived in this little village, Thangbe, with my grandparents. No different from the rest of remote villages in our country. We had no indoor plumbing, no school, no phone, no fridges, etc. In other words, we hardly had any amenities. Amenities most of us now take for granted. Birth as a bhote, as Nepalese call us, considered a low caste, as you might be aware, and I'm sure you are aware, and in a poor family meant that I was not expected to make much of my life. I wasn't even expected to go to school, for instance. But my parents, even though they had no history of education and lived in Pokhara, wanted me to join them so that they could send me to school. After repeated requests from my parents, my grandfather took me to the city. And like in the village, living conditions in Pokhara were not much different, not much better. We were 5 of us in a single room. After a couple of moves, we ended up in a 2-room living arrangement. By that time, we were anywhere from 7 to 10 members, including cousins and relatives. I was attending government schools at the time, moving schools with movement in residence. A teacher at the 3rd school, Bal Jyoti, was the first person who made a difference in my life. Probably the biggest difference in my life. He was responsible for starting me on this incredible journey of education and discovery about the world and its people. Realizing that I had potential, this teacher took my dad aside and told him, "Your son has potential, but if you leave him here, nothing will become of that. Take him to Kathmandu and put him in a good school." Heeding his advice, my dad brought me to Kathmandu, and to make a long story short, I ended up at St. Xavier's Godavari School. At St. Xavier's, I was encouraged and inspired by North American teachers to dream. They also provided me with the drive to imagine a world and life different from that in Nepal. My 5th grade teacher, Father Downing from the city of Cincinnati in the U.S., was one such teacher. Apart from regaling us with stories of the U.S., he would bring former student visitors to the school to talk to us about their lives, many of them either graduates or current students at colleges and universities in the U.S. As a result, as a 5th grader, I dreamt of going to the U.S. for further studies and ultimately of returning home, returning to Nepal to help children from backgrounds similar to mine. But as the firstborn, I was under constant pressure to quit school and start working to support my family financially. Furthermore, because I was a bhote, as I was growing up, our Nepalese society continuously reinforced its lack of belief in me. In spite of all that, stubbornly, I stayed on in school and completed high school, becoming the first one from my entire extended family to do so. Then in 1988, the first lifeline appeared, a full scholarship to the United World College of the Adriatic. No questions so far? None? Okay, let me continue then. Right. One of the number of things I recall about my experience at the United World College, one which always gives me a really warm feeling in my heart, is the way my friends and their families made me feel special during vacations when I couldn't afford to fly home nor go on vacation elsewhere. Every single school break, my friends would invite me to stay with their families. Not only that, over winter break, for example, the family would give me Christmas presents, just as they did their own children. An Italian family not only bought presents for me, they also bought a gift to give to a very good friend of mine as her birthday present from me. During those 2 years, I was on the receiving end of incredible kindness and generosity. Also, during those 2 years, I met and befriended fellow students from all over the world, shrinking my world. Traveling a bit, I got a glimpse into the natural beauty of our planet, something I had only read about in the books that I devoured, in the novels that I devoured throughout my school career in Nepal. Towards the end of my UWC experience, I finally realized my dream of going to the US and ended up in Grinnell College, also pretty much on 100% scholarship. At Grinnell, again, I met some amazing people and was on the receiving end of a great deal of kindness and generosity again. Graduating from Grinnell College, I became the first person from my village, and maybe even the whole of Upper Mustang region, to get tertiary qualification from an educational institution in the West. Approaching graduation, I knew what I wanted to do, and it wasn't to return to Nepal. Not immediately anyway. The spring of '94, my last semester at Grinnell, one late afternoon, watching the late afternoon sky turning different hues every several seconds, my friend Aubrey had asked, "What do you want to do?" I told her, "I want to go see the world." But the trouble was, I had no idea how. As luck would have it, though, my former chemistry teacher at the United World College of the Adriatic invited me back to teach at the school. I jumped at the opportunity, and that put me on a career of teaching, traveling, and exploring the world. For most of the 20 years between 1994 and 2014, I pursued a fantastic international teaching career spanning 10 different countries. By the time I approached the end of my teaching career, I traveled to about 36 countries, and my network of friends spanned the whole globe. I'd seen and done some amazing things in this incredible world of ours, and learned a great deal about it. I'd trekked to an altitude as high as 5,500 meters in Nepal, and scuba dived to a depth of 31 meters in the Philippines. I'd swum with wild dolphins off the coast of Zanzibar. I'd skied in the Swiss Alps, snow-camped in Norway, hiked in the Dolomites in Italy. I'd gone hot air ballooning in Australia, and had gone on wildlife safaris in Nepal, in Zambia, and the awesome Ngorongoro crater, and the incomparable Serengeti Plains in Tanzania. I'd learned to play the didgeridoo, ultimate frisbee, and to dance salsa and merengue. All the while, of course, I'd been planning to return home to fulfill my original dream. The only question had always been, when? In preparation for the eventual return, ever since leaving for the first time in 1988, I'd been visiting almost once every year. During those visits home, I would make every effort to visit my hometown of Pokhara and also my village of Tangbe. In Pokhara, I would visit the streets we'd lived in and would also make every effort to visit the government schools I had attended. In the meantime, the educational opportunities I'd had the professional experience I had, the travel opportunities, what I experienced, what I did, what I saw, what I had been given and rewarded by people, rewarded with, what I had been given and rewarded with by people I had studied, taught, worked, and traveled with, all those privileges I'd had, they had all been beyond the wildest imagination of the 1981 fifth grade kid at St. Xavier's, Godavari, dreaming of going abroad for studies and making something of himself. Not surprisingly, therefore, even as I was doing everything I felt I needed to maintain my connections and ties to where I came from, those experiences would transform me into a person I hadn't imagined then. One of the important transformations was that of thinking of myself as a human being first, and then everything else. All aspects of my identity, ethnicity, nationality, etc., coming next. What's more, countries now represent more faces, people, and humanity than political and geographical entities. The other result of my incredible international education and travel, I'm going to assume that wasn't a hand. No? Okay. The other result of my incredible international education and travel was drawing certain conclusions about life and the world we live in. Here's one of the first ones. Can everyone read that? Those at the back? Yeah? Okay. You with the red jacket there. Why don't you read it out loud? Come on. Yes, you.
There is no such thing in the meaning of life. You make life meaningful by the way you live.
Thank you. Excellent. At the core of that is the confirmation I felt I got from my belief in compassion, a Buddhist belief, and living by its dictates. However, having been born a Buddhist in a country populated by Hindus and therefore following Hindu cultural norms and practices, while sometimes being taught by Christians at a Jesuit school, having gotten a high school diploma in a Catholic country and worked in 2 Islamic countries, etc., I've also realized the following about beliefs. Same one. The one with the in red jacket. You're stuck with this task now. You do realize that, right?
Which are, if there would have been either more than one truth or only one reason. However, that does not mean that one can or shouldn't live by them.
Thank you. One could make one's life meaningful by living according to a certain set of religious beliefs, but not insist or require or demand that others also believe them and live by them. Having also been born into a poor family and everything else that followed, the following is also abundantly clear to me now. Let's try another red jacket.
A child growing up or grows up with some very simple but crucial and care values.
Core.
Core values for the simple reason that they are made to believe that they don't own much else or value. But with the time, as they grow up, they discover that there isn't much else of much value apart for those values.
Thank you. And those core values are none other than kindness, generosity, and compassion. In other words, humanity. That which I came across throughout my life, all through my life. That which I was a beneficiary of pretty much all my life. What I also came to realize, having experienced and seen poverty all over the world, everywhere I lived and traveled, is this. Do us the honor.
Those that do the most grueling work to make a living have the hardest time actually making a living.
Thank you. I met this porter on a trek to my village, somewhere between Tatopani and Jomsom, way back in the spring of 2000. The man's load was so heavy that he took maybe a step every 2 seconds. But because he was so poor and was paid so little, he carried his own food and cooking utensils to save as much as he could. The poorest and some of the hardest working people in our own country and in the rest of the planet have the hardest time even putting a meal, a decent single meal a day, on the table for themselves and their children. And yet, these very people, the weakest, the most vulnerable, the poor, the marginalized, and their children, are often treated the worst. I, however, have believed the following for a long time. Right, another red jacket. Or let's try the red cap.
The worth of a person or a people is not in their nationality, skin color, religion, classes, caste, nor the size of their house, nor in how superior they think they are. Their worth is in the very way they treat the weakest and the most vulnerable in their midst.
Thank you. Some of the weakest and the most vulnerable in our country are children of poor families, children of Dalits, the untouchables, children of marginalized groups such as Tamangs and Tharus, especially girls. So, in March 2013, I'd finally decided to return home for good, to help vulnerable children, vulnerable Nepalese children, children from low socioeconomic backgrounds. Except I would take a detour. On May 1st, I would be thrown in jail for allegedly insulting Islam. Unlike a number of other fellow Nepalese jailed on trumped-up charges, who had no help from anyone, once again, people came to my rescue. Friends from all around the world and friends of friends came to my rescue. They initiated a worldwide campaign asking the Qatari government to respect my right to due process or to release me on human rights grounds. The campaign got so big, as a matter of fact, that within 4 days of initiation, I was released. I returned home on May 13 after spending 12 days in jail. The reason behind my victimization, once again, had been the circumstances of my birth, being born a Nepalese. The 20-month experience in Qatar in general, and the 12 days in jail in particular, was yet another lesson in pain, suffering from injustices, and redemption by people. But hundreds of thousands of others everywhere, in many of the countries I've lived and traveled, suffer similar and other injustices all the time. In our own country, families of migrant laborers, poor families and their children, families and their children belonging to the low castes, etc., suffer from injustices all the time as a result of either birth and or poverty. The particular way our Nepalese society views birth and the way poverty is dealt with, I believe, is unjust. Since returning home on May 13, 2013, I've been doing what I can to right those injustices. I'm doing everything I can, both through Committed, the organization I run with my buddy Jay Shuvatara, and at times also independently. Committed helps government and community schools. The following video provides a glimpse into Raithani School in Thangpalkot, one of the schools we help in the village. Though it was made in June 2013 to woo potential donors to my fundraising drive, it gives you an idea for the school.
I want to be a policeman.
I want to be an engineer.
I want to be a doctor.
I want to be a nurse.
I want to be a teacher.
I want to be
We're here in Sindapalchok at the school that you're supporting. You've just heard the dreams and aspirations of the students. But there's a huge gap between their dreams and reality. The reality is that the school doesn't have enough classrooms. For instance, this particular classroom, they have had to put 2 different classes together. And right now, there are over 50 students in here. The other issue, the other challenge here is the quality of teaching. Although the teachers themselves are highly committed, they lack experience and they lack training to help the students realize their dreams. I'm incredibly grateful for the support that you provided me thus far. I need one final push to get us past the tipping point, to help the children of Sindapalchok achieve their dreams. In addition to that, in addition to being involved with Committed, I'm also heavily involved in the United World College movement, which would also be relevant to all of you gathered here after you complete your SLC. As a member of the Nepal UWC Selection Committee, I'm involved in the selection of the next generation of Nepalese youngsters, concentrating my efforts into encouraging children from low socioeconomic backgrounds to apply and assisting them whenever and however I'm able. For instance, last year, the candidate we selected, Iju, came from a family that could not afford the 2,500 US dollars or so in personal expenses, which I fundraised from my network of friends and acquaintances around the world. She is currently a first-year student, first-year IB diploma student at the UWC Maastricht in Holland. This year, we've just completed the selection process and have identified about a dozen Nepalese scholars to attend about 10 different UWCs dotted around the world. And you could be one of them in 2 years' time. All right? That brings me to why I do all that. Here in Nepal, I do them for two reasons. Firstly, to ensure that those children realize their dreams and have, if even on a small scale, the kind of incredible life I've had, namely to see and learn about this marvelous world we live in and the people we share it with. Secondly, and more importantly, to ensure that they do not experience the suffering, the pain, and the injustices I have experienced, which they invariably will, especially little girls and Dalit children, if no one does anything about them or about their situation. While those are the reasons for my work in Nepal, in general, I do them to promote what's called international understanding and contribute to peace in the world. I believe our feelings for fellow human beings, our compassion and empathy for fellow human beings, our ability to see ourselves in the shoes of fellow human beings suffering from injustices and working to alleviate them, will contribute to making the world a better place, a more peaceful place, a goal of United World College education. And that brings me to you, all of you gathered here today. Having reached thus far, you are only one of 3 of your contemporaries who started school with you. I don't know what you are all planning to do with your lives, but many of you have probably big dreams and will no doubt also achieve those dreams. In pursuit of your dreams, most of you will probably go on to complete SLC, which will make you a member of a small minority of Nepalese. According to the 2011 census, only about 10.5% of males have SLC degrees. 9.69 women have SLC, high school degrees. What's more, most of you will probably also get higher secondary education, making you a member of an even smaller and elite group. The percentage of those that have completed 12 years of schooling, 6.85 for males and only 5.94 for females. In other words, you've already had and will probably continue to have opportunities that most Nepalese don't and probably won't have for a while still. As a result, you'll have opportunities, connections, and power in your life that many other Nepalese won't. How you use those opportunities, connections, and power will be entirely up to you. My hope, however, is that you will use it to make your life meaningful, just as I have tried and continue to try to do. Thank you. Now, you can ask all those questions you were dying to ask, that you've been dying to ask. The floor is yours now.